Without disputing the importance or difficulty of the spectrum battle, and clearly the copyright battle in progress is very immediate, but it seems to me that most worrisome right now is the patent battle that I expect to come next. Compared to that, the whole thing with SCO, well, SCO is a paper dragon, a hollow threat. Can you say anything about what you expect that battle to look like and how it will be fought, how it can be?
Sure, Jeffrey. Patents are about politics. I thought that the pharmaceuticals companies did my side a favor by buying us $12 trillion in free publicity in the last half-decade, by teaching every literate 12-year-old on Earth that intellectual property means people dying of preventable diseases because the drugs are too expensive because patents cover them. Patents are politics. Patents are about how we distribute wealth over very long periods of time in quite absolute ways. We're not going to have an answer to our patent problem, which lies in courtrooms or in laboratories. We're going to have an answer to our patent problems, which lies in the actual conduct of politics. You saw the beginning of it this past summer when the European Parliament decided, in a very unusual move, to refuse promulgation to the European Commission's preferences with respect to changes in patent law in Europe regarding inventions practicable in software. The European Commission put forward a suggestion for change and harmonization in European patent law, which would have made the issuance of patents for inventions practicable in software very much easier. The European Parliament, after a lengthy campaign, led in part by the free software movement in Europe, that's Euro-Linux and the Free Software Foundation Europe, and a lot of small software houses in Europe benefiting substantially from the new mode of software as a public utility, a campaign which involved in the end 250,000 petition signatories. The European Parliament decided to say no. And two parties, Greens and Social Democrats in the European Parliament, now understand that patent policy in Europe is a partisan issue. That is to say that there are sides and that electoral politics and party organization can be conducted around those sides. Our society is a much less aware one on that subject. For those of us who live here, the task of getting to the standards set for us by our colleagues in Europe this past summer is the first and most important challenge. We must make our congressmen understand that patent law is not an administrative law subject to be decided in the PTO, but a political subject to be decided by our legislators. We may have to restore actual democracy to the House of Representatives in the United States in order to make that possible. And there are many other aspects to the challenge involved. But this is one of the primary respects in which technically sophisticated people in the United States are going to have to get wise to the mechanisms of politics, because we're not going to solve this in the Supreme Court, and we're not going to solve this in the workstation. We are going to solve this in Congress, and we're going to have to build our muscles up for doing that.
Related to that point, I'm curious, this isn't so much a legal point as maybe even a public relations point. You opened up your talk by saying this is about freedom, not free beer. But when you, I think, listen to people like Jack Valenti and the RIAA, and Mr. McBride, the constant drumbeat is of this idea of free beer and teaching kids that they can't steal from, big music. How do you win that battle of public relations on the ground, which ultimately will have ramifications in Congress? How do you convey that message outside of the technology community?
Well, one of the things that I guess I would say about that is that the English language fights us on it, right? One of the things that has happened over the course of time in our European environments, where the word for free in the sense of costless and the word for free in the sense of liberated are two different words, is that people have twigged to the distinction much more easily. Software libre works nicely, or logiciel libre, if you have to truckle to the Académie Française, in a way that free software doesn't at making that distinction. It was in part for that reason that some folks decided in the late 90s that maybe they ought to try and find another phrase and settled on open source. That turned out to have more difficulties, I think, than benefits for the people who did it, though it now works very nicely as a way for business to identify its interest in what we do without committing itself to political or social philosophies that businessmen may not share, or at any rate don't need to trumpet just in order to get their work done from day to day. So one of the things that we do, those of us who speak English, is we actually do have to reinforce from time to time, that is all the time, the distinction between free beer and free speech. On the other hand, those of us who live in the United States and speak English shouldn't have quite that much trouble, because free speech is a way more important part of the American cultural landscape than free beer is. At least it was in the world I grew up in, whatever Rupert Murdoch may want to say about it now. We are the party of free speech. And we need to point out to people that if you allow anybody, including a well-dressed lobbyist of ancient vintage, to declare that a love of free speech is like taking a CD out of a record store under your arm, game's over. Not game about free software, but game about liberty and life in a free society. We stand for free speech. We're the free speech movement of the moment. And that we have to insist upon all the time, uncompromisingly. My dear friend Mr. Stallman has caused a certain amount of resistance in life by going around saying, it's free software, it's not open source. He has a reason. This is the reason. We need to keep reminding people that what's at stake here is free speech. We need to keep reminding people that what we're doing is trying to keep the freedom of ideas in the 21st century in a world where there are guys with little paste-it labels with price tags on it who would stick it on every idea on earth if it would make value for the shareholders. And what we have to do is to continue to reinforce the recognition that free speech in a technological society means technological free speech. I think we can do that. I think that's a deliverable message. That's what I spend a good deal of my time doing, and while it's true that I bore people occasionally, at least I think I manage more or less to get the point across. We're just all going to have to be really assiduous about doing it.